everybody! For today's lesson, we're going to be looking at solving absolute value equations. Before we begin, we want to look at some of the key vocabulary to get a quick glance into the lesson. Absolute value equations, and absolute deviation. So what is absolute value? Absolute value is the distance between any number and 0 on the number line. So the absolute value of 7 is 7, and the absolute value of -7 is also 7, because there are 7 units in between. To solve for absolute value, we have to account for both positive and negative. We know the absolute value of x equals 7, which means x could either be -7 or +7. Here's an example. The absolute value of ax plus b equals c, which means ax plus b could equal c, or ax plus b could equal -c. Let's do a written one. The absolute value of x minus 1 equals 4. So, x minus 1 equals 4, and x minus 1 equals -4. You will have two answers because you're solving two separate equations. Plus 1, x equals 5. Plus 1, x equals -3. If you go to page 391 and look at example 3, rewriting an absolute value equation. The first step is to write the original equation, which is fairly obvious, I would assume. You must, following the reverse order PEMDAS, get rid of everything outside of the absolute value symbols. First thing you would do would be subtract 5. On both sides, you are left with 3 times the absolute value of 2x minus 7 equals 9. Divide by 3 on both sides, and you are left with the absolute value of 2x minus 7 equals 3. So, the last step is just to solve. 2x minus 7 equals 3. Plus 7, 2x equals 10. Divide by 2, x equals 5. 2x minus 7 equals -3. Plus 7, 2x equals 4. Divide by 2, x equals 2. Your answers would be 5 and 2. Some equations have no solutions. The absolute value of something cannot be a negative number. If you look at page 392, example 4, the absolute value of 3x plus 5, close symbols, plus 6 equals -2. First thing you do is subtract 6 from both sides. You are left with -8. -8 is a negative number, which means there is no solution because the absolute value of something cannot be negative. Absolute deviation. What is absolute deviation? The absolute deviation of a number, x, of a given value is the absolute value of the difference of x and the given value. Absolute deviation is x minus the given value. So, you can see this here. It's the absolute value of x minus the given value. So, the book gives us a really good example, which we're going to follow along. Basketballs. Before the start of a professional basketball game, a basketball must be inflated to an air pressure of 8 pounds per square inch, psi, with an absolute error of 0.5 psi. Absolute error is the absolute deviation of a measured value from the acceptable value. So in this equation, the absolute deviation of the number is 0.5. It's the most error we can go maximum and minimum, positive or negative. Find the minimum and maximum acceptable pressures for the basketball. So first we have to plug it in. It's going to be the absolute error equals the measured air pressure minus the accepted pressure, which is 0.5 equals the absolute value of p minus 8. We're trying to find what the absolute deviation would be. What the maximum and minimum values are, and we already know what the absolute deviation is and what the accepted air pressure is. Solve. Now we just have to solve. 0.5 equals p minus 8 plus 8 equals 8.5. Negative 0.5 equals p minus 8 plus 8 equals still positive 7.5. The minimum and maximum acceptable values of air pressure are 8.5 psi and 7.5 psi. Now that we understand, let's look at some examples. If you go to page 393 in your textbook. Now I've crossed out number 10 and number 21 and left us with 9 and 22. Look at number 9. The absolute value of m plus 3 equals 7, minus 3 equals 4, and -7 minus 3 equals -10. M equals -10 and 4. Error analysis. 22. The absolute value of x minus 6 equals negative 2. X minus 6 equals negative 2, or x minus 6 equals 2. X equals 4, x equals 8. This is wrong. Like we said, the absolute value of something cannot be a negative, which means there's no solution. Here's your homework.